of Apple, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Blackstone, Boeing, 17 rival CEOs who control the very arteries of the global economy.
Take Elon Musk, for example. Behind the smiles, he was dealing with a completely secret panic. Tesla is literally bleeding critical ground in China at an alarming rate. By late 2025, their market share had shrunk to a terrifyingly low 10%. And the craziest part, Wall Street is completely, dangerously ignoring the ticking clock on this. The highly publicized Beijing summit happened in May of 2026. But the resulting trade truce, it legally and completely expires in the fall of 2026.
May 13th, 2026. The smog is heavy as Air Force One touches down in Beijing. And walking off that Boeing VC-25 isn't just the President of the United States. No, walking off that plane is the most heavily concentrated collection of American money, technology, and military influence ever assembled on foreign soil. We are talking about literal trillions of dollars in market capitalization stepping out into the backyard of America's single biggest global rival. The stakes are so high that a single misstep on this tarmac could literally trigger a global recession. 17. That is the exact number of elite American chief executives who made this unprecedented journey. You've got the leaders of Apple, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Blackstone, Boeing, 17 rival CEOs who control the very arteries of the global economy, all flying together into the heart of a geopolitical adversary. It's an immense, almost suffocating concentration of power moving in total synchronization. It was a massive display of force designed to look like diplomacy, but it was actually masking a deep underlying panic that had been quietly ripping through boardrooms from Wall Street to Silicon Valley for the past 12 months.
So you really have to ask yourself the exact same question Wall Street intelligence analysts and rogue traders were frantically trying to decode in real time. What does the U.S. president want so desperately that he brought the most powerful business leaders in America with him? This was absolutely not a standard diplomatic handshake. And more importantly for your portfolio, what was happening to your money behind those heavy closed doors while this silent war was being waged?
Well, the official story fed to the cameras and the public was simple diplomacy. Routine trade talks and standard tariff negotiations. But the real answer, it was far more alarming and completely buried beneath layers of state secrets. The real reason was rare earths for weapons. See, the United States didn't walk into this summit from a position of absolute, unchecked strength. Actually, scratch that. They walked in out of a desperate, terrifying strategic necessity. The kind of necessity that forces massive superpowers to bend.
Most people never even think about rare earths, but they are the invisible, undeniable backbone of the modern world. They're the critical elements in your smartphone, the heavy batteries in your electric car, the processors in your laptop. But crucially, they are absolutely essential for advanced military weapon systems. We're talking about the guidance chips in ballistic missiles and the radar arrays on stealth jets. And China? China controls the vast majority of the global mining and processing of these metals. It is a complete, unyielding supply chain chokehold wrapped right around the throat of the American defense industry.
Here is the detail that feels like it shouldn't even be public knowledge. A recent summary by the Council on Foreign Relations exposed the stark desperation driving this trip. America had depleted a massive amount of its advanced weapon systems in the Middle East. To replenish those multi-million-dollar missile systems, the U.S. military requires an uninterrupted flow of rare earths. Without China's refined materials, the assembly lines for America's most critical defense infrastructure simply grind to a halt. We were quite literally out of ammunition, and we were asking our biggest rival for the gunpowder.
But honestly, the real mystery of this trillion-dollar flight isn't just why they went, it's who got the ultimate VIP treatment. We know 17 CEOs traveled to Beijing, but the US government is incredibly strict and entirely strategic about optics, proximity, and access. Access is the ultimate currency of power. So think about this. Out of those 17 undisputed titans of American industry, how many do you think were actually granted a seat on the president's personal aircraft? 2. Just 2. Out of 17 American chief executives, 15 of them flew commercial or on their massive corporate jets. Only 2 individuals were granted the ultimate geopolitical status symbol of boarding Air Force One itself. I mean, imagine being the CEO of a trillion-dollar company and being told you can't fly on the main plane. It's a deeply calculated, brutal inequality that tells us exactly who holds the real leverage in this high-stakes negotiation. It separates the replaceable from the absolutely indispensable. Those 2 highly coveted seats belong to Elon Musk of Tesla and Jensen Huang of Nvidia. Their exclusive, unprecedented presence on that aircraft signals exactly who the United States views as its most critical sovereign assets. These men aren't just businessmen anymore. They are the sole architects of the artificial intelligence, autonomous infrastructure, and energy grids that will completely define the next century of global dominance. Without them, America falls behind, for sure. But here is the deeply concealed twist that almost everyone missed, playing out exactly like a scene from a spy thriller. Jensen Huang wasn't even on the plane when it left Washington, D.C. In a shocking late-stage development, after nearly a year of quiet, intense lobbying, Huang was secretly added to the presidential entourage during a frozen refueling stop in Alaska. Why the mid-journey surprise? Because Nvidia's AI chips are the actual physical weapons being negotiated on this trip. The US was actively trading silicon for rare earths. So while all this cloak and dagger diplomacy was happening behind heavily guarded doors in Beijing, what exactly was happening to your money? Because the absolute second Wall Street realized Jensen Huang had boarded that plane in Alaska, algorithmic traders and hedge funds went into an absolute frenzy. The markets reacted with unrestrained ferocity, pricing in a completely new global reality before the general public even understood what was happening.
The single-day market surges were explosive. Micron's climbed 4.8%. Tesla closed up 2.7%. Nvidia spiked 2.3%. We're not just talking about a little green day on your trading app. We're talking about billions of dollars in market capitalization materializing out of thin air in a single volatile trading session. Wall Street wasn't just reacting to a diplomatic photo op. They were aggressively pricing in a massive, fundamental shift in international policy that would completely reshape the next decade of tech.
And here is the exact hidden shockwave that fueled that multi-billion-dollar frenzy. Right in the middle of this summit, the US government officially approved Nvidia AI chip sales to Chinese firms. For 2 agonizing years, America had forcefully blocked Nvidia from selling its most advanced processing chips to China, a ban that was costing the company an estimated $5 billion a year in lost revenue. This sudden, massive lifting of the restriction was the real, unpublicized victory Jensen Huang flew to Beijing to secure.
30,000. The sheer scale of this unlock is staggering. Technology analysts on Wall Street looked at this specific AI trade, this exact easing of government restrictions, and confidently projected an unbelievable number, 30,000. That is exactly where Wedbush predicted the heavily tech-weighted NASDAQ index could head in the next year, entirely thanks to this newly reopened pipeline of AI technology. It was quite literally a financial earthquake triggered by one secretive flight across the Pacific.
Okay, but let's peel back the curtain a little bit more. What about the rest of the plane? The other executives didn't just go to awkwardly stand around and support American diplomacy. They went to ensure their own corporate and sometimes literal survival. So what were the hidden agendas of the other CEOs on that trip? What desperate underlying motives forced them to smile for the cameras while shaking hands with the architects of their greatest global competitors? Every single handshake hid an absolute vulnerability. Take Elon Musk, for example. Behind the smiles, he was dealing with a completely secret panic. Tesla is literally bleeding critical ground in China at an alarming rate. By late 2025, their market share had shrunk to a terrifyingly low 10%, almost entirely eclipsed by Chinese EV giant BYD and heavily subsidized local competitors. Musk didn't go to Beijing just for the media optics. No way. He desperately needs Chinese regulators to clear Tesla's full self-driving system so his company can maintain its valuation and survive in the world's most brutal, unforgiving electric vehicle market. And then there's Apple's Tim Cook, who was caught in this impossibly delicate multi-billion-dollar trap. Roughly 80% of Apple's flagship iPhones are physically manufactured and assembled in China. While they sell tens of millions of devices to consumers in the US, the physical assembly of their entire technological empire is inextricably tied to Chinese megafactories. To just pack up and move that infrastructure would require years and billions of dollars that Apple simply doesn't have the time to spend if a full-scale trade war erupts tomorrow. I mean, it makes Apple a literal corporate hostage to Chinese government policy. And remember, Tim Cook is set to officially retire in September, passing the massive weight of this leadership to John Turnus. Cook was actively participating in his final major diplomatic effort, attempting to hand his successor a stabilized environment, a legacy of survival, rather than a ticking supply chain time bomb that absolutely nobody on Earth currently knows how to defuse. Which brings us to the darkest, most unexpected twist of this entire explainer. The global headlines told you the relationship was fixed. The smiling photos told you tensions had evaporated. But the diplomatic reality? The relationship was merely stabilized, not repaired. Both sides simply agreed not to immediately escalate the conflict into mutual economic destruction. But those underlying structural wars over tariffs, export controls, and absolute technology dominance, those are still raging just beneath the surface, burning hotter than ever.
And the craziest part, Wall Street is completely, dangerously ignoring the ticking clock on this. The highly publicized Beijing summit happened in May of 2026. But the resulting trade truce, it legally and completely expires in the fall of 2026. This was merely a temporary fragile ceasefire. In just a few short months, the diplomatic safety net completely vanishes, and the entire multi-trillion-dollar geopolitical relationship goes right back onto the firing line, completely exposed to disaster.
So, as an investor watching this explainer, you're probably wondering how to synthesize this massive, intimidating geopolitical thriller into your own life. What does this actually mean for you? When the most powerful tech CEOs and political leaders are playing a high-stakes game of chess with a fragile global supply chain, how do you position your own hard-earned money to survive the inevitable turbulence that is coming this fall?
Look, the brutal reality of this timeline breaks down exactly like this. In the short term, the risk was low and those stock pops were entirely real. If you held major tech or defense stocks, you probably made a significant amount of money. But in the medium term, the risk level is incredibly high. When that fall truce deadline actually hits, any sudden diplomatic tweet, any overnight policy reversal, or any naval incident in Taiwan threatens to permanently erase every single one of those market gains literally overnight.
And that leads us to the ultimate, inescapable realization of this entire summit. The absolute geopolitical center of gravity has permanently shifted. It no longer belongs entirely to politicians in suits or generals in uniform. It belongs squarely to tech CEOs like Jensen Huang. He controls the literal silicon architecture that every modern military requires to function. He boarded Air Force One because his commercial product is now the very foundation of global military supremacy.
It all boils down to one chilling realization from inside those diplomatic rooms. This was not peace. This was a pause. The trillion-dollar flight to Beijing did not solve the Cold War for technological and rare earth dominance. It merely delayed the next, much more volatile chapter. It was a momentary holding of breath before the real plunge into darkness.
The clock is relentlessly ticking toward the fall. The vital rare earths are still locked in China. The advanced AI chips are still an American weapon. And those 17 CEOs are actively bracing for impact behind the scenes. Are you prepared for what comes next when the truce inevitably ends? The landscape is shifting incredibly fast. Study those supply chains, watch that fall deadline, and make absolutely sure you understand exactly what is holding up the companies in your portfolio. See you in the next explainer.